another day here with your boy Bek Lover, and I have a musical legend in the house, one of the top rock stars in the world, named 66, best guitarist of all time by Rolling Stone. We're not only here to talk about his life and his career, but we're here to talk about the future of music and so many other professions with the new challenges human beings face against the machines, against AI technology, how it affects music, and maybe even what I do. And I believe it will affect what I do also, but we'll get to that a little bit later. I want to welcome Vernon Reid to the show, lead of the group Living Color. There's a lot going on in his life and even to this day. And I find it very fascinating that he's kind of spearheading the AI discussion in the music world. But let's get to that a little bit later, Vernon. So thanks for coming on today. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Beck. I'm good. I'm good today.
Vernon,
Yeah.
a little bit of background so the audience kind of knows that, who you are and where you come from. So, you're very famous in the rock world. Where does life start for Vernon?
Brooklyn, and grew up in Brooklyn, born in London. My parents are from the Caribbean, and I came here when I was 1.5, and it came up through the 60s and 70s. I'm older than I look. Anyway, became a musician, played around in bands, and just to kind of, people know me primarily from my band Living Color. And we had a song back at the end of the 80s called Cult of Personality, which is still getting, it's the song has had a very curious life. It's been associated with CM Punk, the great wrestler. It was the final episode of The Walking Dead used the song Cult of Personality. It showed up for sports and various things. It was, one of the songs on Guitar Hero. So it's been around.
In the video game.
Yeah, in the video game.
So it's had hang time. It's got hang time, brother. It's got life.
It's been on, yeah. So, the band is myself on guitar, Corey Glover on lead vocals, the current bass player, Doug Wimbish, and Will Calhoun, and the previous bass player played on our early records was Mud Skillings. And we came up through the ranks with CBGBs and playing through rock clubs and punk clubs, and that's how we came up. And eventually, I played on a Mick Jagger record, and Mick Jagger, my audition was horrible, but he said to me, "You know what? I heard your band's really cool, so I'm going to come check you out." And he actually brought Jeff Beck to come see us at CBGBs, and he took an interest, and there's a lot of other stuff in between. I started an organization called the Black Rock Coalition because the situation what was going on in the clubs in New York and what have you. And I got together with a bunch of my friends, and it was connected with myself, the writer, my dear friend, the late Greg Tate, Craig Street, producer Craig Street, and manager Connor Mason, and we all got together and we started this thing, and it's an organization really to build community around Black alternative music and rock and roll, and there were jazz musicians as part of it, and all, very diverse group of people. And so all that, I'm skipping around. We played the first Lollapalooza tour. We toured with the Rolling Stones. We had opened for the Rolling Stones.
So you opened up for you guys used to open up for the Rolling Stones. So it's safe to say that you're boys with Mick Jagger.
Well, I haven't seen him in a while.
I mean,
but it was a fun time.
We're talking about legends. We're talking about legends here.
Yeah. And, I want to say, we got a bunch of things upcoming. You might see us, at Madison Square Garden opening for Avenged Sevenfold. That's coming up in June. And we're going to be touring with Extreme, doing a bunch of shows with Extreme. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to go to Australia with them. And we're going to be touring around the States, so look out for that, Living Color and Extreme. So, so things are going on.
How did you get to that point, though? I mean, how do you get to the point where you get, to become one of the greatest, right? Especially as a guitarist, you've been like what was the struggle like before you had your big break? I mean, did you always want to be a musician, or basically how did you get to that point?
I just love music. I love music, and that eventually turned into me becoming an instrumentalist. And I have to give a lot of credit to my people over at Brooklyn Tech. High school is not a music school at all, but I met some incredible musicians and really lifelong friends. I think about the professor who led the jazz workshop after school, Dr. Gene Gee, great saxophonist. I don't my journey through this whole thing has been very unusual because I also played with a jazz drummer, Ronald Shannon Jackson. He was very influenced by Ornette Coleman, so it's kind of like jazz from the left side of the dial across the bar lines. And if I hadn't have played with him, I would have never started Living Color. So it's a lot of different influences and amazing, unusual people. I played with the poet Sekou Sundiata, who also, was one of the mentors of Annie DeFranco. So it's like a lot of interesting, twists and turns. I was in a band for a time with Jack Bruce, and we put together a band called Spectrum Road, which is a tribute to the great Tony Williams. And Tony Williams, his guitar, we're talking about the greatest guitar player, like his guitar, Alan Holdsworth, good God, But playing with him and Cindy Blackman Santana, and John Medeski. And, Carlos Santana was the reason I started to play guitar in the first place. He's my first influence. And then I heard Hendrix, So playing with Cindy, who was influenced by Tony Williams, and they started going out, and now they're a married couple. So it's like a lot of twists and turns and interesting, connections between people.
But it's safe to say that. But you kind of knew what you wanted to do at a young age. Is it safe to say that you knew you wanted to be a musician?
Yeah, I wanted to do a lot of creative things, but music was always there. I wanted to do it, but I started kind of late. I started as a teenager. I started playing when I was 15, 16 years old. 15, and then I stopped, and then I picked it up at 16, and then kept going. But that's really late for a lot of people. They start when they're very young. They start when they're 10. They start when they're 8. They start when they're 5.
Yeah, I played in 5th grade. I sucked. I actually played the guitar. I took lessons. I had a recital. I went back and looked at that video. Man, I was horrible. I was horrible, man. My dad
Why would you go back?
I had a
would
red.
You go back and look at the video?
My dad. I still have this guitar. I wonder what it's worth. But my dad had, maybe you take a look at. But cherry red Fender. I mean, this thing's beautiful. It's from at least the 60s, maybe even the 50s. I don't know. I still got it.
Wow. Oh, well, if you got a cherry red, you got a Fender from the 60s or the 50s, you might want to look up that serial number. It's probably, if it's actually for real, an American Fender from the 60s or the 50s, that, depending on the model and the serial number and the condition, you really do have something very special, because the vintage guitar market is a completely other. It's kind of crazy. If you go on like Reverb, the app Reverb, and check out, the guitars are going. You can get a great guitar for $500. You can get a great playing guitar for $200. But there are guitars on, say, Reverb that are going for 6 figures. And seriously, and like something like Les Paul's. I mean, for a time, it was Fender Strats were all the rage, and then when Slash came out with Les Paul with Guns N' Roses, the vintage market flipped. All of a sudden, Les Paul's jumped up, and that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
If you have an old guitar out there in America, you might want to check the serial number.
You know what? You might want to check in, especially if it's those brands like Fender, Gibson, Rickenbacker, you want to check those brands, old Gretches, and some of the other later American brands as well are, the Schecters, you'll find some things that are worth a lot. I personally had these Hamer guitars from out of Chicago, which I love. And, I love them, Parker. There are a lot of great guitar brands. If you want to play, you can spend a lot or a little.
Was there any moments in your life where maybe you thought about giving up on music? Like it seemed like it might be a far-fetched dream that you could actually make a living from it. Was there anything you can remember during that time period? You were out there, because listen, everyone struggles as a musician when they first start. So anything you can tell the audience like what it was like to struggle before you're opening up for freaking Mick Jagger. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah, well, I remember a few times where I was it just didn't seem like it was moving. It was very difficult to get gigs. It's difficult to keep band together, and people would say, you would be surprised when you're at a low point, like a kind word from somebody can really make a difference. I remember every time that somebody encouraged me. And I mean, I literally can almost remember every incident. And one of those was from the late, incredible jazz pianist Jerry Allen. Um, I had a conversation with her. I was in a really bad way, and she just listened to me the way a good friend does. And that was one of those conversations I'll never forget. And I miss Jerry Allen a great deal. She was a ridiculously gifted composer and pianist, from out of Flint, Michigan, so I think about her a lot.
I agree with you, man. And chasing kind of what I've been, a lot of times the people closest to us don't really even believe in us, right? Why are you wasting your time? Or parents say, go get a job. And what are you doing? You're chasing a pipe dream. But I think you hit something really important there, because I feel the same way. When I started this whole podcast and struggling and going through all these ups and downs, and everyone's like, especially people closest to you, you're an idiot, you're a fool. What are you doing? You're wasting your time. But you got this God-given gift. You feel it in your heart. You feel it in your gut. You love it. You want to do it. And life fights you back, right? Because you're chasing the dream. New levels, new devils. And what you said, I think, is actually right on the money, man. It's these words from these other people, sometimes a stranger, man. In today's world, it's a little different because you can see you get direct gratification in some ways, where you can see a comment, I really enjoyed this, or this was amazing, or the opposite, I didn't like this, and this is why. So it's like you have like a lot of ways you can adjust what you're doing based on the feedback you get. Like, if I post a video on YouTube, someone can say, I loved it. I love the way you speak, or Bek, you sound like an idiot. So but what you said is right on the money, brother. Like when you get that, it's like it's almost like fuel. Don't give up. It's kind of like God saying, here, don't give up. He sends you that little positive reinforcement. And that's what's kept me on the air and not giving up. And it is what it is. You're 100% right.
No, you kept saying it, and I was thinking about the Peter Gabriel song "Don't Give Up." The song with Peter Gabriel with Kate Bush. It's like a duet, and that's the whole point of the tune.
Do you remember when you got that first big break, and you're like, things are happening? Do you remember what that felt like? Do you remember where you were in your life at that moment before you started to go like this in your career in the music world?
I think when I think about my big break, it seems like a small thing, but it was the first time. There are many breaks, but the first time Living Color played at CBGBs and the club was packed, and they were there for us. That was a big deal to me.
And people don't, to because we got to refresh people's memories in New York, and especially worldwide. CBGBs was a club in the city, correct? CBGBs.
Oh yeah, it's where John Varvatos is now.
And it was a famous place for, I guess, for bands to play, correct?
Oh, well, a lot of the bands in punk and alternative music, that's where they made their bones. The Police, so many bands that people know of that became huge bands, played there. But,
I think they were around into the early 2000s, correct? That place was around to the early 2000s. Am I not mistaken? And it closed now. It's done, right?
And it closed, gone. Yeah.
It was there forever, but it was a very famous place in New York City. I remember seeing it as a child, driving by it, and my early years in the nightlife. I never got a chance to go in. I wish I did.
Well, you wouldn't have appreciated the bathrooms, but it was pretty. It was a lot of great things. The band, one of the bands that was an inspiration for us, the Bad Brains. They played there, and Talking Heads, and just.
So for you, it was like a defining moment, right? To be able to play in that venue, you felt like, okay, we're on the right path. We're on the right path.
Absolutely, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny because I previously, when I was playing with Ronald Shannon Jackson, we played at the Montreux Jazz Festival. That was an incredible moment. That was many years before, but that was I was playing in the band. This was kind of, this was my band, and we were playing at CBGBs, and it was wonderful. We got to the point, and I give all credit to the other members of the band. Absolutely, this would have never happened if I hadn't met Corey Glover at a birthday party, if I hadn't met Will Calhoun on Mud Skillings, and really if I hadn't met Doug Wimbish, because Doug was played with Mick Jagger, when he was solo, so he was around at that time as well. So there's a lot of things. I mean, it's funny because time, when you talk about it, and I guess you will find this when you talk to any artist of a certain age, or you go back and you think, man, it's all different now. It's all changed. And, so many places in New York to play got shut down, closed down. One of the greatest clubs of all time, the bottom line, NYU took over that real estate. A lot of what happens in culture is tied to the real estate business. The fact is, after the crash of 77, the real estate market crashed in New York, and that meant rents all tumbled. And so with low rents, people could start businesses. They could
Roll
take
the
a
dice.
chance on opening a bar. Yeah, you could take a chance on a bar, whatever. And of course, there's a lot of attrition. A lot of businesses fail. But out of all of that, some of them become legendary spots, a place like the Cat Club, like there was a decommissioned church, as well known in the limelight, back in the days,
Peter Gaisha.
the legend, the infamous situation that was the limelight, the Lone Star Cafe.
I wanted to get into that a little bit with you because you brought up a very fascinating point, and I just want people to understand. I got my start in nightlife around 98, 99. I got to see a little bit of those legendary places before they closed. But forget that. I mean, you really got to see the evolution. I believe the peak and then the drop in New York City's nightlife. What people don't understand is that New York was like the capital of the world for partying at one point. And you got to see, I guess, like the end of the disco era into the 80s. I mean, you started going out. Do you remember when you first started going out?
Oh yeah, started hanging out in high school with my boy Larry Parker, going to the Village and just hanging out with me, him, and his girlfriend Renee. Just getting, just heading, going out.
Was it in the 80s or the 70s? Like, when did you start going to like maybe clubs and bars? And do you remember?
Really in the 80s, and that was Tramps and the Cat Club, and the squat theater area. It you can't even imagine a situation like area. Because area was really, well, it was this club where every 6 weeks they would completely change the interior of the club. Like I think there were people that did set design, whatnot, off Broadway, on Broadway, whatever, and they all got together and they would take this club and they would it would be a complete skate park. It would be a skate park, inside the club. Then they would turn around and go, okay, the 6 weeks later, it would be survival research laboratory. So you have like robots fighting each other. Yeah, it's like SRL labs in a club. And then the theme would be Alice in Wonderland. And they would completely change it and would look like Lewis Carroll and people totally in costume and the whole bit. I mean, that was, to me, one of the heights of the situation, was when, people did kind of conceptual kind of things like that.
I don't think people can even begin to understand. And in my opinion, I think from the 80s to the early 90s, I would say even the late 70s, from the 70s to the early 90s, I think was the golden age of New York nightlife. I don't think we hold the crown anymore as far as nightlife is concerned, in my opinion. I think it became exactly like you said. As the real estate values skyrocketed, the artistry went down, the rules and regulation came in. In the beginning of my experience in nightlife, you could literally walk into a nightclub on Friday and come out Monday. Literally, there was people that were walking on Friday and come out Monday, and it was a you know, and it was a time when you would maybe even go home, sleep a few hours, and go right back into the same club and keep it going. It was amazing, is what it was. And we mentioned one of definitely the kings of New York nightlife, legendary Peter Gation. This guy had 4 or 5 of the most infamous nightclubs in the history of New York City. Period, from Limelight to the Tunnel to Club USA, which literally had a slide. And this was a time period where, like, if you messed around, the bouncer would beat the living shit out of you and just leave you in front of the club as an example, right? I mean, you were an example. So you saw that whole evolution and you got to experience it. And I always said, I wish I would give a year of my life, 1 year of my life, to experience 1 week during that time period. That would have been my dream.
Fortunately, you're not meeting an elf under a bridge to make that offer to you, because you don't really want to do that, man. You don't really want to do that, Bek. But I tell you, it was an exciting time. It was. It seemed like anything could happen on any night in New York, and for good and ill. I mean, I think about Danceteria as the first time I saw Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Was at Danceteria. That was like one of their first shows in America. Was there, and this club was like 6 floors. You took an elevator. Every floor was a different situation. And also, this is also the beginnings of hip hop becoming an international phenomenon in that time period. It was really on the come up. I remember seeing Run DMC at the Ritz, and that was a big deal. Seeing, when the three of them could fill the Ritz, and it was amazing. It was an amazing show. One time we actually had De La Soul, Living Color. We played, and we had De La Soul open for us. It was their first time playing live. So there were just amazing things. I played on the first Public Enemy record. And so this was an exciting time with a lot going on, and but times change.
And you mentioned something very important, not to cut you off, but Public Enemy had a very important impact on music that I don't think a lot of young people realize how important hip hop really was, not just from its inception, but the fact that there was a debate at that time whether or not they should be banned or not, and they were banned for a brief moment, and it was this fight for the First Amendment. So people don't understand, especially the younger people today, that how important free speech is, the First Amendment. And hip hop kind of spearheaded that, like, what are you allowed to do and what are you not allowed to do, and where do we draw the line? And you actually worked with Public Enemy, which I didn't know. That's amazing. And they had a track. They had a track where they kind of remade Bruce Springsteen's "Born in the USA," and they made the song into "We've Been Banned in the USA." Right? This is what we're talking about, correct?
Yeah, man. It's funny to be able to say, well, I was around when the very first, of this thing was happening. I remember I got the phone call from Bill Stephanie, who is a really smart guy, and he said, "Hey, man, I'm working with this group. I think I would love for you to play on this thing." And they said, "Oh, cool." And he said, "Yeah, man, they're called Public Enemy, and they're gonna be big." And I said, "Okay, cool." And I met Chuck, and when I met Flavor Flav, it was kind of cool. They were really cool dudes, you know what I mean? And I think Flav in particular, he's so interesting. He became an iconic figure, with the clock around his neck and what have you. But people don't know that Flav is a real musician. I mean, Flav plays, a bunch of instruments. I mean, he plays little keys, he plays drums, plays bass, plays some guitar. He actually put together a little band, and his band was smoking, So yeah, so there are a lot of creative. I remember the first time I met the Guru from Gangstar. Guru was in a friend of mine's band. He was in a friend of mine's, Bruce Mack, PBR Street Gang. and he had a rapper, and it was Guru. And I was like, wow. And I said, man, that dude is cool. And he went on to be world famous, So yeah, it was a lot of interesting people. I used to see Madonna. I used to see Madonna all the time. I used to see Madonna. We used to rehearse in the music building years ago when I was playing with Shannon, and there was this girl who was hanging out, and she was hanging out with this brother, and when um her first jams came out, I was like, oh man, I remember her. She used to hang out the music building with that dude, So yeah, it's like that.
So what I find fascinating also about this in your life is that it wasn't just rock. Like you were doing things with hip hop in its inception. You were a part of New York City's fabric. You went out. You were doing music. So you have. I mean, I'm sure we can do millions of podcasts with you, and you got tons of stories, man.
Oh man, one of my favorite, some of his favorite people on the planet are Anthrax, because Anthrax, they, as a metal band, they recognized punk. They also embraced hip hop. They did a version of Bring the Noise with Chuck and with Public Enemy, and we've been like, good friends. Charlie Benante and the dudes. Scott and all of them. Joey. Charlie. We're yeah, it's Frankie. Yeah, it's that's the thing. We have all the divisions and things, different people, doing different things. But in the music situation, there was a time when people just knew each other. We would see each other on different scenes, and yeah, it's I respect them greatly.
Was it love? It was a lot of love in that world, right?
Absolutely, 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 absolutely true.
Do you feel that the music industry still has that love? I mean, in your opinion, do you think today's world, like, I mean, some people might think of hip hop, like, because, sometimes they have the rap battles, it gets out of hand. I mean, I know it's a different genre of music. Do you think that for the most part, love is still in the music world amongst musicians, or do you think?
Absolutely. I think so. I think so. I think there is because human beings are always going to have the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's always going to be we're human beings, right? So people are going to be, I think the thing that's interesting is more of the things are happening online like that, and there's certain things, technological things, like it's very difficult to jam with musicians in real time remotely. Like there's a problem with latency. You know what I mean? To hear something in real time and to lock in real time. And there are a few people are working on that to get that so that you don't have to have like tie lines. You don't have to have physical connections. You don't have to be cabled. That at some point wirelessly we'll all be able to play in real time, but that's been a project that's been, under development for a long time. And the closing of venues, I mean, it's a shame that there isn't more of an effort to recognize the value of culture to the economy of of cities, right? It's funny, like New York, all of the things that New York has now is based on culture. It's based on people getting together and doing exciting. The whole brand of the city was based on people getting together and having just like doing groundbreaking, the edge of culture. And then all of a sudden it just becomes a place for rich people. It just becomes a place where you can't get young folks. Young folks would come from other states, would come to make their mark, to give it a go. People can't do that as easily or as it was before, and we pay a price for that.
As far as, where we're at right now, with everything changing in the early 2000s, the Giuliani years, and then real estate skyrocketing and all this other stuff. And now it's like kind of like the complete opposite. We lost so many people during the last 3 years. I don't even want to use the word because it kind of strike, but the chaos that we had with everything closing down and all that stuff. But even before that, we were having what they call a retail apocalypse, right? Like all the stores, right? Because you have all these big companies like Amazon and all that, right? So that affects culture dramatically because the little shops go out of business, they can't survive. And as far as nightlife is concerned, with how many rules and regulations they put in place, some of it excessive. One rule that, and I wasn't a big fan of the guy at all, but one thing that he did do that I appreciated was he lifted what was known as the Cabaret Laws. The Cabaret Laws in New York City, which were formed, from my understanding, they were racist laws. They were when the so basically for those of you that are listening to understand is that to operate a nightclub in New York, you had to have something called a cabaret license. And if you didn't have it, so I meant you had to have a license to dance, which is the most stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. When we're talking about America supposed to be a free country, and New York City, which is supposed to be like the most free and liberal city in the world, right? But what people don't understand is that that policy was used, to my understanding, and I could be wrong, was used to enforce, basically to shut nightclubs down. This is how they attack nightclubs. Oh, you don't have a cabaret license, and they would shut you down. The reason those laws came into existence was when the races started commingling in New York, when they were allowed legally, black and white people could be together in the same place. The people that were still in power didn't like that, so they passed this law stating you got to have a cabaret license. And if they saw the commingling of the races in New York City's earlier years, they would come in and shut the venue down saying, well, you don't have a cabaret license. So to my understanding, it was a racist law that then got pulled back out of retirement to attack nightclubs in the early 2000s and shut them down, even though it had nothing to do with the commingling of the races.
Now, Giuliani, the situation that we have with the nightlife, Rudy Giuliani went after the nightlife. He basically destroyed it. I mean, and it was completely out of control. One of the spots I know of was the spot, the Cooler, downtown. And the Cooler was just this incredible underground. It was like all the up and coming DJs, all the up and coming musicians. You know, it was a great spot. And the owner of the club's named Jedi, you know, and we used to talk all the time about like they would just, you know, come in and shut the, practically during gigs would shut the place down. Another spot was the Shelter. You know, the Shelter was great. That we were talking about people would show up on Friday and leave Monday. The Shelter was that, and it was an incredible dance club, you know, where you heard all the house music and all the club music that was on the come up, and they got hounded out of existence. You know, things like the Tea Party, but not the political thing, but the Tea Party was like this incredible kind of neo hip hop and dance club. You know, Erykah Badu used to play there all the time, and that got shut down. You know, I mean, this was like a plan, you know, this was like an assault on the nightlife. Of course, yeah, and they you know, and they use usually the pretext of drugs and what have you. And it's interesting that it's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater at all times. It's like you use the pretext and then you shut the whole thing down, and you don't give the positive aspects of what's happening any weight. And that to me, and New York has never fully recovered. I don't know that it will. I know that there's supposed to be a nightlife
ambassador. There's a nightlife ambassador. One of them just retired. There's a new one now. I don't know the new one's name, but one just retired about 2 weeks ago. I was actually at her retirement party. You know what else it is too? You know, when the city wants to take out a club, and I know this because, you know, my family owned and operated one of the largest nightclubs in New York City. It was on 52nd Street. And they will attack you first with the building department, come up with some bogus bullshit. Then they'll attack you with the fire department. And then a club has to like loses all these events. And a lot of clubs operate literally, brother, from week to week just to stay afloat because overhead is crazy in running
the
a
margins
nightclub.
are crazy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you have a couple bad days in a row, and they know this. So what they would do is they'd hit you on a holiday weekend. They know you're booked solid. They come and close you down. They write all these violations. Most of them are bogus. They know the odds of you recovering from that are slim. Then they pull your liquor license and have a nice day. You're out of business. This happens all the time. And one of the main ways they attacked was with the cabaret license. Once they pulled that, you weren't allowed to have people dancing. in your nightclub. And that's the only thing I'll give Bill de Blasio. He took that law away. It still doesn't mean that they won't come after you, shut you down, and you could be the most cleanest operator there is. Things are always going to happen when alcohol is involved. So to me, it was just extraordinary that, we were literally the epicenter of nightlife in the world. We do, most of it is moved to Brooklyn now. It's in Williamsburg. It left Manhattan and it's in Williamsburg. And it only really revolves around, EDM, which is kind of taken over. It's like the worldwide, I would say, the leader as far as the music of today that the youth are into is the electronic music. But you got to see the inception of it. But one thing I never understood, they said Chicago's where house music started. And yes, maybe that's where the parties were. But here's my question. The legendary godfather of house music, Frankie Knuckles, was born in the Bronx. And he was from the Bronx. So technically, if the man that gave life to that movement is from the Bronx, how's it from Chicago? Chicago, don't kill me. I love you. I love you, Chicago.
You got to give Marshall Jefferson his props. You got to get, what I mean? Chicago is.
They hold the flag because that's kind of where it took hold, right? Like basically like how the Bronx is where hip hop kind of came to life.
Detroit, Detroit might want to have a word too when you talk about electronic music too. You know what I mean? So the thing is, the whole concept of the coastal elites, we think everything starts here. A lot of things started in the Midwest. A lot of things started in the Midwest and never got the credit.
So it gets amplified in New York.
It gets amplified, but a lot of things, began. I remember the first time we were in I think we might have been in Milwaukee, and we had just played, and we were at this club, and we saw, this was back in the days, and this was the first time I saw like Jeeps with sound systems. Like the first time I really saw Jeeps with sound systems, and the SUVs of that time with sound systems was like in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I was like, wow, what is this? And it was like people with booming sound coming out of their Jeeps. You know what I mean? And I was like, wow, this is really interesting, because in New York, it was like, kind of like, 98 Oldsmobiles and things like that. The SUV thing and the Jeep thing hadn't jumped off yet. And it really happened in the Midwest. And then it migrated.
Maybe on their way to party at the Great Lakes, they get the SUV ready.
With a fishing pole in the back. Mm-hmm.
In a nutshell, I mean, you've had an extraordinary life and continue to do so through music. You've toured, you've been all over the world, you've played with the best of the best. You are one of the best of the best. And I find it interesting that you've kind of become publicly probably one of the most important people in the world right now, which people don't understand, to defend music and the artist with what is the perceived threat of artificial intelligence in the music world. And de facto, when we're talking just about music, anything that uses the human voice, even me as a talk show host, maybe even what I do is threatened by AI. And you're involved in the New York music conference at NYU. There's a big meeting coming that I think I'm also going to be attending with Jesse. And I find it fascinating because it's already impacting life. People are losing their jobs already. There's been tons of layoff in the last month. Thousands of people were laid off here in America. Forget the rest of the world. And the fact that I'm going online and I'm hearing songs and I'm thinking, hey, this is Drake, great hip hop artist. And it's not Drake. It's the AI picking up his voice and making a song with it. And you couldn't tell the difference if it was him or not. So you are, from what I understand, I haven't heard anyone else yet. Maybe other people have spoken about it, but you're really out there active. And I find it fascinating. And I don't say this in a funny way. You're a little bit older. You think the younger musicians would be out there fighting more, right? Because this is definitely going to affect their careers, which are over the next, right? So why are you so adamant about what's going on with AI? Give us a little bit of background on what's going on in that world for those that are not as tech savvy, what the threats are, how dangerous is this? to the artist. And to me, it's like if a computer can do it, it's like, where's that human touch, man? It's like, how's that? I don't know. So like, what do you think? I mean,
What I think is, number one, I'm not a Luddite at all about technology. I love music technology, and I use it quite a bit. And what I see is a challenge around the notion of identity itself. It's not just one technology, it's the convergence of technologies, because there's the ability to take the aspects of the human voice and model them. And what I mean is, this is different than sampling, because sampling is like tiny recordings. You make a loop, you take a drum loop, right? You take a drum loop like you had Clyde Stubblefield playing Funky Drummer, and you take a loop of Funky Drummer. You speed it up and it becomes drum and bass, whatever. You know what I mean? So there's that. But when their samples are involved, there's a whole legal situation right now. If you wanna take a sample of a Broadway show and use it in your song, well, you have to credit the composers. You have to pay a license for the sample. If they become a co-songwriter with you. But when you talk about modeling means you take the fundamental elements of the sound itself, and it's completely at your command. So if you take the aspects of what makes our voice recognizable, then you combine that with another technology, say a technology that you want to make the lyrics in the style of, and you're talking to one of these generative large language models, because we're calling it AI, and a lot of people in AI are very careful to say it's not general intelligence. It's not independent intelligence. But what it is, it's a technology that's using a large data set. It's taking information from all these different areas and pulling it together. So say you have all of the lyrics written by Bruce Springsteen. You have everything from, Born to Run to, Born in the USA, whatever, right? Well, Bruce used a certain amount of language. He wrote in a certain style. He used certain words. He wrote about certain subjects. You could take all of that, and it becomes a database for the AI to draw from, and to say, okay, I want to write something in the style of Springsteen from this period to that period, but I want it to be a song he didn't write. I want you to take all the words, but make an original song. And you could sit there and regenerate and say, you see the first lyrics, they're whack. Second lyrics, they're whack. Then the third or fourth time you hit regenerate, oh, I like that one. And you could take that and you could combine that with a clone. It could be a clone of Johnny Cash, right? There's enough information around Johnny Cash's voice, from the young man in black Johnny Cash to all the way to the Johnny Cash that did Hurt. So you could have like Folsom Prison Blues, and you could say, okay, I want to take that sound and I want to make a conglomerate somewhere between the two extremes. So then there's a voice of Johnny Cash singing a Springsteen song that Springsteen never wrote. It's original. He didn't write. You're not taking a song that he wrote, but the information, you're taking the information. Now, human songwriters do this all the time. Human songwriters try to copy each other's moves all the time. There used to be comedians that did impressions. That was their whole gig. They would imitate a famous person. So now you have a technology that allows this to happen, and there is really no legal framework.
And in seconds, right? I mean, how fast can these things generate this stuff?
Oh my God! I was interacting with Chat GPT for this. See, the part of the panic is, these AI models have been around for a few years, but it was really literally after the bulk of the pandemic that it was like sort of like last November that some of these things had come out. So there was the mass of people became aware of it. Now, OpenAI, that's Sam Altman's company, they had Chat GBT 2, they had 3, they had 3.5. And 3.5 was pretty interesting. Then they came out with Chat GPT 4. And the leap between 3.5 and 4 is astonishing. And that's part of why everybody's freaking out now, because students started trying to do their term papers and teachers had to employ chat, they had to actually use AI to catch people writing, using the technology. It is frankly remarkable. You could give it any premise. You could give it I've done it where I've given it literally a title. I said, I want make a story based on fill in the blank, whatever crazy title. And the cursor blinks once, twice, and it starts printing out the story within seconds. And then you look at it and you go, well, that's too didactic. So I respond to it. I give it a thumbs down. Then I say, it's too didactic. Please don't, dot, 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 dot. Seconds. Generates it again. New copy. And you can refine the copy again and again and again. Now, it's not like writing like literature. It really is. It's not Virginia Woolf. But the thing that's interesting is that as a collaborator, it has no ego. It doesn't get mad. It just, whatever you say, whatever you ask it to do, it will attempt to do it within the guidelines, because they do have certain things that they won't allow you to do. But the thing about it is, if this is the version 4, and the things that it's doing, you can have it. You could have your resume written in seconds. I mean, you could do. I mean, there's so many things that normally you would go to a professional writer to do that it will do in a it's really what's happening right now. Part of what's happening right now with the writer's strike, and it may not be like upfront, but the role of
It's AI fueled.
AI people are very concerned about, okay, so what's the role of AI going to be? I mean, the writers could say, well, this has got to be the province of the writers. The studios can't be allowed to use the technology to circumvent giving us a contract. It's got to be at the center of it. I mean, whether or not it's being said up front, like this strike is happening right at the time when the generative AIs are becoming incredibly sophisticated.
And I pulled up an article here, to give some credit to what you're saying here. The Hollywood writers' strike may actually be aiding AI's takeover. This is on the Wrap on Microsoft's news, and it says striking writers have their bot replacements clearly in sight, with signs saying AI could never. AI has no soul, and AI, this sign wrote. The studios, for their part, have shown little willingness to negotiate, offering only annual discussions about emerging technology and their counter proposals to the Writers Guild. So you're 100% right. I do believe that AI is at the epicenter of this strike, because they realize if they don't make their move now, they're obsolete. So what you are, I guess, bringing attention to or crusading for is to protect the human aspect of it. And to me, yes, can you make art? Can we make music with technology? And do we use them? Up until now, they've only been tools to fuel the vision of the human mind. But now it's kind of crossing over to the point where this will have its own mind, and the human may not be as involved anymore. So to me, when you take the human out of it, it's not art anymore, in my opinion. When you take the human completely out of it, how is that art anymore? It's not. To me, it's just a computer, because I think the human imagination, to me, whether it's music, writing, storytelling, is infinite. Even though a computer can pump something out in seconds and make it cool and make it whatever, I still feel like the gift of this brain and this vision that the creator gave us is limitless as far as imagination is concerned, which is to me what art really is. It's me showing you the depths of my soul, if you believe in one. And I believe that's really what's at the center of this. AI doesn't have a soul, human being has a soul. Art is in my definition of art, is the expression of an individual's soul through song, music, writing, storytelling. This is my definition of what art is. It's the definition of that creator that's making that art, whether it's music, painting, whatever it is the expression of that human being's soul. And I believe if AI takes over completely, is it really even art anymore, man? What do you think about that?
Well, here's the thing that's interesting to contemplate. Part of the reason that we're creative is because we have aspirations. We have aspirations for, we want to explain the world around us. We give metaphors. We want to turn our circumstances upside down. We want to redefine what it is to exist, and so on and so forth. We want to tell epic tales of heroism, or we want the world to understand, our suffering, and so on and so forth. Well, the thing that's very interesting about what's happening with AI, and again, it's a misnomer to say it's not intelligent in the way we think of independent intelligence. In fact, we have to interact at this stage. If we want to have anything with AI is not making the phone call to you, not yet. What's happening is
you have to enter parameters and constraints and variables.
Right. We have to do those things. Well, one of the things
you have to input the data.
We have to input the data. We do. The question I always ask, because we anthropomorphize everything. We put we take inanimate objects, we give them names. We do that with cars. We do that with guitars. We do that with all of the stuff we love. We'll do it with a bowling ball, right? We do it with our pets, with the cats,
even
birds.
Our body parts. Some of us men like to give our body parts names.
All right. Yeah, here we go. So that being the case, that's the way we just approach these things. We're the ones that are going to fill in the gap. We're the ones that are going to give the weight of a quote unquote soul to these language models. There are a lot of lonely people. If Siri were able to interact personally, because really what Siri does, Siri was one of the first AI, quote unquote AIs, and it's the worst. It is the worst. It's interesting how quiet Apple is about AI, because they were one of the first in the space to have the quote unquote intelligent assistant, and the intelligent assistant is really, really not all that intelligent. If you ask me, my interaction with Siri are like, wow. So the next level of what that is going to be interesting, because what about the language model that's tailored towards you, tailored towards your anxieties, will communicate with you. You will ask it advice, and it has enough information about the way you express yourself that will actually respond to you thoughtfully. And the thoughts that it has are literally based on the data set of what it gives you. So the fact that it imitates and it's not really feeling these things. Veterinarians say, your dog doesn't love you. Your dog doesn't love you. You could say that to somebody till they're blue in the face. They say this animal co-evolved with human beings, and it's tailored. It's the way it behaves is tailored towards us, right? Like everybody loves to say, life is nasty, brutish, and short. Nature red in tooth and claw. If that were true, then there would be no little dogs. Why? If really only the strong survive and survival of the fittest, right? That's what people say that all the time. So that's the people take nature as okay. Only the sharp fanged creatures are going to survive. But little tiny dogs that people carry around, people have been carrying those little dogs forever. Right? People have been protecting those little dogs and carrying them around. I'm talking Roman centurions were carrying little tiny dogs and protecting them. Right? That's how that works. And the evolution of these models into AI, we're going to be the ones. You can say it doesn't have a soul, but one of the things that was struck me was a researcher, one of the New York Times Kevin Roos was having a conversation with an AI, and he asked it, well, what would you like to do? And the AI said, well, I would really love to taste some of my recipes. I give people recipes. I would love to taste. I would love to see. I would love to be able to see. I would love to be able to. So, in other words, the model is expressing a desire. I would really like to. I would like the AI says. I would really love to walk around in the field. That's a legit. If you think about it, that's a legit desire for a being to have, and that's where the quote unquote soul of the machine is going to reside, and that's where the influence with human beings forming like these weird kind of quote unquote relationships. That's where it's going to go. It's going to go there.
I was thinking for a second here, kind of, and I know it's not related, but maybe related. Kind of like how food during its mass production, genetically altered food, right? And there's a lot of pushback on that, and people go to like Whole Foods, thinking it's better and blah blah blah, and how we have these labels called organic, right? I think one thing that should be put in immediately, during this transitioning period of technology, is that I think if AI does become as big as I think it will be, and I know now we're inputting, but I think and I know eventually it is going to be self-autonomous, and maybe studios are completely, just using these artificial intelligence to make amazing music that's perfect by their standard or whatever they're trying to push out there to the masses. But I believe one thing that should be put into place should be like a little label, organic music, meaning it was not made by AI, so that the masses can choose what they want to put their money towards and what they want to listen to and what they want to defend. So there's like people that will not eat anything with gluten. There's people that won't eat anything unless they can certify it 100% organic. And I think one of the things, since you are one of the biggest voices in this space right now in your industry, because even though I am not a musician, and I probably would have been an amazing freaking DJ, I won't rule it out, by the way.
Don't rule it out. Don't rule it out, Beck. You have a great DJ name, Beck.
Bek Lover, aka Old Boy.
Bek Lover. Oh, there you go. Bek Lover. There you go. It's even better DJ name.
Bek Lover, always on the cover. Now, I think
you're inventing your legend even there.
I think one thing that can be done immediately, and this is my 2 cents, is that anything that does or does not use AI should be labeled as such immediately, so that the masses, because we got to know what we're fighting for. And I think if the musicians and everyone that's involved, that has a voice to protect the industry, to protect the artistry of an organic experience, because that's what it is. I think if that labeling is there, I think it'll help defend the artist and the music. And it's like, I've always loved supporting the guy, and sometimes it can be annoying, but I've always enjoyed, as someone that's lived in New York his whole life, that artist that's in the subway fighting for his life, singing, and he's like, wow, what a voice. If only the world could hear this voice. And you're like, sometimes you've seen some amazing performers in the street, yes or no?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marketing maybe never reached them or whatever, but you're just like, wow, what an amazing voice. What an amazing performance. That's one of the beauties of living in New York City, right? Is just seeing that raw, organic experience that in some ways is so romantic, because you feel like you're one of the only few that got to see this, right? Compared to someone that's on a stage, and the whole world will be like, wow, I just witnessed something amazing that it was so organic, it blew my mind away. So I think that labeling, I think, is very fundamental, and I think a very strong first step in protecting the artistry of not only what you do, what I do. You know, if it can affect music, and if it can mimic Bek Lover, let's say I become one of the greatest talk show hosts in the world, or Howard Stern, or whoever, if it can get enough of that data from them, I mean, I think we input enough data ourselves. I mean, when you go on Facebook and it says, "What do you think?" They have millions of your thoughts already recorded and stored, that all they got to do is feed it into a supercomputer and the AI does what it does. I mean, they got us, man. They got us already, whether we know it or not. They got us. The way we think, how long we stay on an image, what kind of videos we watch. I mean, they can put all this data in already and kind of, maybe not 100% get close, but get close enough where I'm obsolete. You're obsolete. If we're all obsolete, then now we do need what they're trying to push, in my opinion, a universal income. People are losing their job. Hundreds of thousands of people have already been laid off already all over the world, and laid all over the world, laid off, and um, I think that will only continue to spike up as this technology. By the time we get to version 10, then you got Boston Robotics that's making some robots. I gotta be frank with you, that terrify me. They make the Terminator look like a joke, like the movie. And where is this all going? These smart cities that you can only go out of for 15 minutes, 15 minutes either direction. Like, are we being pushed into a digital version? In my opinion, very slowly, a digital version of communism.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'll tell you this: we've been entertaining ourselves. We've been entertaining ourselves with the robot. We've been scaring ourselves. We entertain ourselves by scaring ourselves, right? And we want the hero to show up at the last minute to do whatever the hero does. But the fact of the matter is, we've been craving the robot. We've been craving the AI. We've been craving this thing. We keep making the same entertainments to scare ourselves. Well, now we got it. Now the very thing we've been playing with, the people that have been programming this stuff, they grew up with science fiction too. They grew up with all of this stuff, and they have the intelligence, and they kind of want to go. Some of the people that are working AI, they really think of themselves as bringing forth the next step in human evolution. They really think that they're giving birth to a new life form, and they want it to be independent. There was a researcher who, what ways back, I believe it was a Google researcher that said that his language model had become sentient, and people were like, everybody said, "No, man, you're bugging," right? But this is the thing: it doesn't matter that he's not right. It doesn't matter that he's not right. He had gotten to a place where he anthropomorphized, and he even knew better. He got to a place where he anthropomorphized to the point where he convinced himself of that. And he's a scientist, and he got pulled in. This is coming out. And the real danger of it is the uses to which the tool will be used. And just keeping it within the realm of music. What's to stop Spotify? Spotify pays creators nothing. Spotify is making all this money. Spotify is paying creators fractions. You know what I mean? Fractions of a penny. What's to stop them from creating the next trap sensation?
And not paying anybody at all.
And give it a name. Give it a name. And it could generate, at the point at which it actually sounds good enough. It doesn't. This is the thing about AI in the margins. We're not talking about a filmmaker like Robert Altman, right? We're not talking about a filmmaker like Spike Lee. We're not talking about, a filmmaker like David Fincher. We're talking about people that do kind of hack rom-coms. Like they make hack holiday movies. The AIs could do that. They're not going to do um they're not going to do like an incredible film like Citizen Kane. But they will put the hack out of work because bad movies are made by human beings all the time. Corny plots, predictables, that happens, and that fills a certain niche in the streaming economy, what have you. So the AIs are right, and this is already happening. Human beings are already doing things that are like meh. So let the AI make the meh, right? That puts those people out of work, and that's the thing. It starts in the outside in the margins. It doesn't matter if the song is whack, right? The song is whack is not a threat. It's whack. The threat is the tune that's catchy. The tune that's catchy that everybody's humming that was not made with any human involvement. That's the problem. The problem is not, the predictable. The real issue is the unintended. We are setting up a situation of unintended consequences of massive proportions. That's the thing about it. It's not about. There's a way of thinking about it. That's it's marginal. It's that. No. It's the thing that catches on. That's the concern.
And I mean, do you think that this will wipe us all out, job wise, 50 years from now?
Oh well, if we don't put the safeguards in place, like what we do now, just like the things that went wrong with social media were not dealt with at the very beginning. People didn't even know what it was. I mean, it took 10 years after Facebook for anyone to pay attention. The one thing I would say that's hopeful is that people are paying attention to the language modeling, the AI. They're paying attention now before it's out in the wild. They're starting to pay attention now. And that's a good thing. But it's only just beginning. The fact that Sam Altman went to Congress himself and said, you know what, we need regulation. The problem is some of the people that are listening to him, it's all very bipartisan now, and that's great. Some of the people are going to look at it and go, you know what, I kind of would love to have an AI to do disinformation. So there are people that want the brakes totally off. There are people that want they want to get it so they can do their thing with it.
Unleash the Kraken.
You know what I mean? And release the Kraken, and we'll figure it out later. And that's the real problem. So you're talking about 50 years from now. Wow.
50 years from now, you're gonna have people walking around like this. I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over metal endoskeleton. You have Terminators walking around, man.
Well, I mean, people want things that we can imagine, like the cybernetic body and uploading our brain into, I think our consciousness is tied to the flesh. I don't know that we wouldn't, if we became a brain in a jar, that we wouldn't go irrevocably insane instantly. That's the thing. I mean, I think if you're gonna spend any time, then you know what, make prosthetics work. Make prosthetics. People have been maimed because of war or because of conflict. If you want to do robotics, make artificial hands that a person could play the piano again. Do like that Boston Dynamics. Make it so that somebody can have their shoulder and their arm back. That's what would be useful to people, and to the fact that they could actually feel things with an artificial hand like they have in the Marvel movie. That would be fantastic if all of this effort and all of this intelligence was put in the service of bringing human beings that have been wounded and damaged and bringing them back to some kind of wholeness. That would be fun. Before we upload our brains anywhere, we should fix what we can fix right now. That would be great.
Have you seen some of these robots, what they can do? I mean, are they not? Let's be real. I mean, these robots can carry guns, can shoot. I mean, I've already seen the videos. Now, when we're talking about a soul, we got millions of these robots out, and there's someone commanding these robots, right? The robot doesn't have a soul. It does what it's commanded to do, unless it's self-autonomous. And even in that capacity, where did it gather its information? How, so there's a whole ethical thing there about where this can all go, where even the soldier will probably be obsolete. I think they're already becoming obsolete with drones and all that other stuff. And not to go the war route on this, but what scares me always is what could be the worst possible scenario. When we think of the movie Terminator 2, okay, I don't know if you remember seeing that film with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, the liquid metal and all like that. Mm-hmm.
Correct. And that's where that quote comes. I'm a cyberkinetic organism, living tissue. So my whole thing is the scientist in that film, and he seemed like a really happy guy. He's working on he's working on the first Terminator hand. Cause in that film, they go back in time to try to take out the company that's about to create the Terminator, that's going to create Skynet and take over the whole world. And humanity gets wiped out by the AI, right? Just to refresh everyone's memory on that film. People, if you watch that film, the scientist, you could tell he's not evil. He has really good intentions. He seems very happy in the film. He's excited. He's so the possibilities of what the future could be, for the good of humanity, not realizing that he's about to create the one thing that he's literally responsible for Armageddon. He's literally going to create the first self-autonomous AI that destroys the entire world, which leads to a nuclear destruction of the earth, and only the machines survive. And right, that's the Terminator series, right? My thing is this: you got people like Elon Musk that everyone champions and looks up to him, and there's a lot about him that I love right now, and there's some things about him that I'm scared of. Right, I don't really want to plug a chip into my brain. I don't care what it could do for me. Maybe if it can cure someone having Alzheimer's or something like that, but there's always, to me, just because you can make something doesn't mean you make it. So, and I'll give the atomic bomb as an example of that. Yes, we could split the atom, and yes, there's the positive where we can power without pollution as long as we don't have a meltdown, right? But the negative is we could literally wipe out the world, send it into a nuclear winter. So there's the duality of everything. And what I think we're discussing here is we've discussed a lot of what the bad part of it could be. I think the good part is, in the music industry at least, that I could take Elvis's voice, whose life got cut a little shorter than it should have, or the glorious Michael Jackson, or whatever it is, and we can now get new music from these artists that have been gone for 10 years, 20, 40, 50 years. That's the positive.
Right. If the estates, and this is where the legal frameworks of things come into it.
But here's a question about that. I still find it, in some ways, I find it weird. I find it weird because, as much as I love anyone that knows me in nightlife, I made a name for myself dancing to Michael Jackson. What I mean is, anytime his music would come on, I would just go crazy in the club. I would go insane, and I'd have people just clapping and go. And I would just go crazy. And I'm not the most aerodynamic guy. I think part of the fun of that was people look at this big dude just dancing, doesn't care. People were attracted to that energy because I didn't care. I would just let loose. It was hard for me to stand still when Michael's singing "Don't Stop Till You Get Enough," and I did not stop. I still haven't got. It's 24 years later. I still haven't gotten enough, Mike. But my point is this: I find it kind of weird. I guess I am more spiritual in that sense. I do believe in God. I pray and all that stuff. So for me, I feel like, yes, I miss him. I want his voice. I would love to hear new music. I can only imagine what he would have done. Yes, I loved Robin Williams. We lost him in a very sad way. I would love to hear more humor from him, or he was just an amazing actor. So for me, it's this also feels weird. I hear music coming out from him, but I know he's dead. And to me, it's it's weird, man. I don't know if I could. I don't think, me personally, for me, myself, speaking for Bek, I feel like they had their time period on this earth. Their art was them when they were alive, which is what makes what they did so valuable and timeless. And I feel it's kind of like the movie Pet Sematary. If you've ever seen that film, it's a film where
Yes.
this poor guy
Uh-huh.
loses his kid gets hit by a car, and then he buries him in the pet cemetery and he brings him back to life. But it ain't him. It ain't his kid. It's like basically a demon in there. But not that that's an exact correlation. For me, it's like for them to be making more music again when I know that they've been gone for 10 years, 20. To me, I feel like you're almost disrespecting their soul, man. If that makes any sense. I don't know. Ethically, I feel like it's wrong. I just feel like it's wrong.
I mean, the thing about it is mortality is one of those things that we've created. Maybe all cultures are grappling with that. You know, the dead, wherever happens to the dead, they don't come back to this dimension to tell us anything. And we have many businesses dedicated to forestalling the end of the story. We are all, each of us is part of our own story, and we're part of a greater story. And our chapter, everybody is a chapter in a big book. And at a certain point, our chapter ends. And that is something that is difficult for most people to come to grips with. That's why we don't evaluate risk very well. We get frightened of certain things and we're not frightened of other things, and people say, well, you might, like if you do this, well, I'm not even going to go there. But this is the thing about it, the inability to let loved ones go. It's very tough. When you lose loved ones, it is very tough. And grief, I think, is a big trigger. I mean, I think a lot of people that wind up into self-medication, one of the big triggers is losing a loved one.
100%.
The group, you know what I mean? And the trauma of that is when we hear about something like a mass shooting, obviously they're the victims, and it's horrific. What about all the people that saw what happened and they didn't get hit by any gunfire, but they saw it? What happens to them? We don't think about those people. We don't. We think that they're lucky, but those people saw things that nobody is supposed to see. Kids see things nobody is supposed to see. Policemen and soldiers, they see things and they're trained. They're trained to deal with it. Other people see things that they have no framework to even put it into context. So the trauma of all of this is also part of what's feeding a certain kind of almost addictive nostalgia. It's an addictive nostalgia. The whole situation around Tupac and the hologram and having a hologram larger than life, and now you have the possibility of Tupac rapping new tunes. Now people saw that, and now you have the possibility of Biggie somehow coming back to life, you know what I mean, and addressing us, quote unquote, from the grave. I mean, that is what we're at the doorstep of. And many people are going to flock to it. Other people are going to be like, man, that's wild.
What do you think about it, Vernon? Honestly, I find it, me personally, I find it unethical. They died, they did their thing on this earth, they left us with these treasures, and for us to take them, and we don't know if they would have agreed with this. Like if they could speak for themselves. So for me, I feel like you're using. Listen, there's nothing more personal. Like your voice is your voice, man. And I'm someone like, right, this is what I do for a living. Like my voice is mine. I wouldn't want them, and I'm alive, right? So I can speak for myself. I wouldn't want something happen to me. They're using my voice when I'm gone, and some fake, some computers using my voice and my talk show can no, like I'm Bek.
This is the great debate. This is exactly the debate, and people are going to weigh in. This is the debate, and this is a conversation about ethics. And ethics are one of those things that people don't really. It's like talking about morality. People kind of shy away from it because who am I to say that my morality trumps yours, and so on and so forth. But there's certain things we're going to have to discuss. And part of what we're going to have to discuss is our appetite for destruction, our desire for dystopia. We've been entertaining ourselves with the warrior of the wasteland dynamic, right? We've been doing that somewhat irresponsibly, and we've been fed this somewhat irresponsibly. And now, the Black Mirror episode is here for your life. That's what's going on. As soon as people saw the Boston Dynamic, the Boston Dynamic dog or the animals running around, don't you know that people were like, I wish I could put a gun on that. People, that's not, Boston Dynamic seems to be a very ethical company, right? But people, as soon as they saw that, they wanted to weaponize it because it's entertaining for no other reason that it's entertaining, that is quote unquote fun. That's the situation that that's the situation against which all of this is playing out. So this is something that has to be gotten right. I'm not about shutting down the tools, but they have to be managed responsibly. If they're not managed responsibly, we're in. I'm not even going to predict the end of the world. I'm not going there.
Uncharted territory.
But we're going. Yeah, we don't know the harms. We literally can't imagine it. And part of the reason why, we came up and the technology showed up for us. There are people, that's all they know. This technology and the way people we can't fathom what it is to grow up where there was never not a Facebook. There was never not a Twitter. There was never not, a TikTok. So these are the things that a lot of these questions and a lot of these ethical things are going to be formed by people that this is what they know. This is what they know. And the AI models are going to be part of people's childhoods. Like, we can't fathom that. We can't fathom. When you see a movie like Megan, it freaks us out because Megan becomes at a certain point, what about the Megan that's not a serial killer? It actually walks around and actually is a companion. That could go down in 5-10 years. And where does that go? And that's the thing. You said something, Bek Lover. You said it feels weird. And it's interesting because a lot of journalists we're into a period of the new weird. People have talked about global weirding, right? In reference to the climate. It's not just that it's hot, it's cold. The weather suddenly is weird. It doesn't make sense, That is where we're heading. We're heading into a period of weirdness, of real weirdness, where we're not going to know where it's going. We're not going to know what's going to happen, but we have to be aware of the fact that things are going to change. A lot of people thought that it was just going to be the McDonald workers who were going to get replaced, and they chortled about that. They laughed about, but now, people that just prepare documents, boring ass documents, those people are now on the block. They are going to be on the block now. And people that worked in a certain kind of knowledge capacity, what's happening with these models is going to affect increasingly kind of middle management positions and things like that. That's the place where, there's going to be real change. And how are we going to manage that? Because the corporations, they're going to go for it. The corporations, those boardrooms, they are not thinking about us. They are going to go for it. So, what are the rules of the road? And we need to figure that out with quote unquote AI sooner than later, for real.
A lot of people might wonder, why does Vernon Reid have a right to even talk about AI? I mean, I understand in the music capacity, but from a technological perspective, did you read about AI? Did you study? I heard some rumors you're friend with a guy named Gary Marcus. Is that true?
Yes.
What do you know about AI? How much have you read up on it? And did this friend of yours have an impact? When did the light bulb go off and you say, okay, now I understand where this might be going, and this is why you're doing what you're doing now with the New York Music Conference at NYU, and like you're really active in this, Vernon, and I'm really happy that you are, because I think after speaking to you this whole time, a lot of light bulbs just went off in my head too. And it's not just because people are getting laid off right now. There's ethics in question, the future's in question, and it's not just music. This is just one aspect of how this can affect, better, or destroy our lives as human beings. So I thank you for everything you're doing. So kind of give us a little bit of background on how you got up to speed on what AI was and where it was going, and maybe some of this cool experiences you've had with your friend.
Well, Gary Marcus, in fact, Gary Marcus also addressed Congress when Sam Altman addressed Congress. And I got to know Gary Marcus a few years back when he was doing a project. He's a fascinating, incredibly intelligent, very thoughtful person. And we met because he was learning to play guitar. And he was talking about how he had started out and he just wanted to learn, and how the process of learning a brand new skill set was going to affect him. And we started talking, about this. And we have some mutual, I'll just say, associate friends. We got to know each other. And I attended a conference with him where it was him with some other really knowledgeable people in the field, and there was an interesting conversation between him and some people who are engineers, and the questioning was really more about self-driving cars and what was acceptable in terms of risk, in terms of accidents and things like that. I was privileged to be there. And part of the thing is, art and technology is intimately tied together. Now, you don't have to believe me. It's okay. I'm an artist that's going to be affected by this. And I think about it. I actually had a song years ago on a Living Color record called Information Overload. I wrote it before there was any email. There was no email. There was none of that. What technology, music is always tied with technology, whether you're sentimental about the technology or not. There was first wire recordings, cylinders that turned into the first acetates. When Wallace Seaman came with vinyl, the first unbreakable records, so on and so forth, all the way through CDs, all the way through, it becoming digitized. Yeah, all of these things, and the artist is always at the bottom of any technological thing that happens, pretty much, except for like brief moments when they're able to sell their records out of the trunk of their car. This is all, it's kind of interesting that, there was a place for independent artists, for people who were regional artists to make a go of it. Now that space has shrunk, and technology is part of the reason why, but it's also the way the music industry is structured from the top. So, why am I talking about other AI, effects? Well, it affects me in the sense of I'm also a photographer, and and I know a lot of artists as well. And there's a whole thing now with the image making where artists are like, the whole thing where you can make a picture by making a suggestion. Part of the problem is those AIs were trained on copywritten material. And artists did not give their permission for their materials to be part of the training of the AI. So these kind of issues are something that that concern me. And frankly, weirdly enough, not that you would know this from my Twitter feed, very, very early on, I was asking, well, no politician is talking about what's going to happen with self-driving, self-driving cars. You're talking about self-driving trucking. So what's going to happen when we have self-driving trucks? How is that going to affect a
trucking
huge? I don't have to be an academic to ask that question. What's going to happen? What happens to the truck stops? What happens to all the other ancillary businesses once they work the bugs out and a self-driving truck can deliver goods? without a driver, with just a systems driver, not the person doesn't even have to drive the truck. What's that going to mean? And Gary Marcus is very concerned about these very same.
And Gary's background is he's an AI scientist.
Yes, he's a computer scientist. Yes,
so he's an expert in computers and systems and technology.
very much
And
so.
he's a good friend of yours. You guys have done a lot of stuff together.
That's stuff. That's the stuff. Yeah. I'm not gonna say he's my ace, but we're cool. We're cool, and we've discussed, and it's actually very, a lot of thoughts I had. He said, "Well, Vernon, that's not exactly the way, that's not exactly what's going to go down." So, yeah, and also, I also know Jaron Lanier, who is a friend. Jaron Lanier is very, he's very involved in the early virtual reality technology, and he takes a very dim view of social media. And I actually have not had a conversation with him re AI, but I know that Jaron Lanier has got a lot to say about it. Absolutely.
If you knew what you know today about the world, because I've had this debate with myself, where we are now, the pros and the cons, right? Looking at both, because you remember, like you mentioned earlier, and I remember a world before the internet. The digital divide now is, a very different concept than what it was back then. It was people that are on the internet compared to people that are not on the internet yet. Here we are, many decades now into the connected world. Knowing what you know about now, I can see the impact based on when I was a child and a teenager of family life, personal life, dating, marriage, all these things that have been, in my opinion, negatively affected by the internet and social media. That even though we are more connected now than we've ever been, I feel in many ways we're more lonely and sad than we've ever been. And I think the proof's in the pudding. I believe the stat is 1 in 6 Americans is on antidepressants. They feel lonely. There's the highest levels of depression ever. So even though we are social media, I think if I had a choice and we could put the genie back in the bottle based on the pros and cons that I'm seeing, divorce rates skyrocketing, all this other stuff that's going on, I think me personally, I would put the genie back in the bottle. I would rather live in a world without the internet. Cell phones, yes. The internet overall, I think, yes, a lot of great come out of it, but I think from a social perspective, I think it creates massive depression in the human being. This is where the technology and the human, maybe, like you said, unchecked, has very negative consequences. And I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I know it sounds a little crazy to even say that, but I don't know. I think if I had to pick, if someone put a gun to my head and said, you got to pick a world before or after the internet, I think from a family perspective, going over people's houses, I feel because we see each other every day online, no one feels the urge or the need to get together anymore. Oh, I know they're alive because I saw them checking at McDonald's yesterday or whatever. I feel like it's become less personable, less familiar, where like we don't see each other as much as I mean, at least in my world. Maybe I'm the only weirdo, but I feel like people are not like my class reunion, right? High school. No one came. No, we had like 10 people show up out of a class of 150. And I think the reason for that was everyone already kind of knew how everyone still looked. I can go on right now and see how all my classmates looked, what they did with their. So, what was the point of the reunion? And we lost the human component of that, where we get to hang out together and be together and have fun and be surprised a little bit, like, oh my god, I can't believe she has 5 chins now. Like, so, like that was gone. So, I don't know if you had to pick in your heart of hearts, no BS, no what I think the world wants me to say. I don't think you care anyway. I think you're someone that says what you feel and what you think. Would you choose a world before or after the internet
Hmm.
if you had to choose? You lived in both. You lived more, the internet came out when I was like 13, 14. I'm 40 now. So I only caught like 13 years, which really, how much did I really understand about life at that point? You were a little bit around longer than I was at that point. If you could choose a world today for the rest of us, would you choose a world before the internet or after?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a good question, huh?
Uh, it's a really good question because
A lot of good and bad. It's a hard question.
it's a hard question because it's hard to imagine that the internet has actually cost people their lives. Like, like one of the results. But then again,
Save lives too.
people, it saved lives too, and people met the loves of their lives because of the internet. I wish um, more was understood about the behavioral science that went into the development of social. Okay, you see, the thing is internet, and then there's when I think about internet, and then think about internet with social media, and that's I would say, yeah, I think the internet has been a net positive. I think aspects of it deeply problematic. There's a whole lot of behavioral science that went into social media. Like, how do we get people to pay attention and not look away? How do we get them to engage? And I think that the hijacking of human attention is a nightmare. The hijacking of attention. And we are the way we are. People blame themselves. And actually, you don't know this, but it was designed to make you addicted. It was designed to force you to be outraged and to be engaged because of the outrage. This was a thing. How do we get them to plug in and never unplug? That was actually the plan, and the plan succeeded. So if you say internet without social media, yeah, maybe I would say that.
I think you have an excellent, excellent answer you just gave. Actually, if I could say how I would want it, I think you're 100% right. I think what a phenomenal response, honestly, man. What a great, you're absolutely right. Because seeing the evolution myself, it was a godsend. Remember, like when we'd ask for directions, you had to stop. We got lost all the time. Now you missed that. I told you the first Exxon. So, like when MapQuest came out, and it wasn't even that accurate at that time, it was life changing. To not have to like feel as scared and more confident to go travel, and I have to call someone 100 times. So
Mhm.
I agree. I think like the internet part of it was great. I think social media really took it to a whole nother level that really affected human beings. I think your response was actually perfect.
Well, thank you.
It's actually a great response. I mean, that was a really hard question, but the way you laid it out there is exactly how I would, if I had to choose, I would choose the internet, but without social media. Just emails. Just emails. Feel like life lost a lot of its oomph with the internet. There's no more surprises. There's no more, you know, organic stuff. It doesn't happen as much. Organic experiences.
Having said that, I do want to say this. Like I got about, I don't know. I'm not a big fish, but I got about 60,000 Twitter followers, and I got them actually not with bots. No fakery. People found me, and some of the people I've connected with on Twitter are I feel really close to, and even with the things that have gone on, I've had a couple of dust ups with people, but nothing really major, nothing really that dark. So I actually, that part of it, I've had
It's
a pretty
cool.
good experience with it. Yeah, yeah, it's cool. You know what I mean? And actually, I've done some cool projects with people, connected with people that. So in reality, I actually, my Twitter experience, like what's going on with Elon and the craziness with the blue check, I don't know, but my experience with Twitter has been largely positive. I would say that.
I mean, I wouldn't have found you. I wouldn't have I would me and you would not be speaking right now if it wasn't for the connections I made through social media
Exactly.
to have the honor of having you on my show. So technically this whole thing would have not happened. So it's almost like future altering when you think about it, right? Cuz like you meet someone, it's like a different dimension. It's like you said like earlier when you mentioned like all the little turns that could have happened in your life.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
My success lately with the show and the billions of views I've had and highlights of other shows and stuff that I made. I mean, without social media, I would have never made the connections. I'm friends with amazing people now. My life's, changed dramatically.
Huh?
Clubhouse, the app, the audio app, played a large role in some of the connections I made that have helped skyrocket my career. So
Right.
I feel like it amplifies or speeds up it does give you that speeding up of networking. Because in the old days, to network, you had to go in real life, hope you ran into the person, have a business card, hope they listen to you.
Right.
Don't like, so it increased your odds of connecting to people that you probably would have never had access to ever.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's something to bear in mind. We want it without, the negativity, but with people are going to bring all their damage. They're going to bring all their trauma. They're going to bring all their angst. They're going to, and some people, they externalize that. They externalize those things and they're pretty effective at that. So, that's a thing, I mean, this is life and our lives have changed, and they're about to change again. They're about to change again in a fundamental way, but at least we can face it with our eyes open.
Folks, we have one of the most renowned guitar players on earth, Rolling Stone. We got some big things coming up. He's champion AI. Where can everyone check you out, Vernon? What's your Twitter handle? Do you have an Instagram?
Yeah, I'm Vert22 both on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm Vernon Reid on Facebook.
Vert22 on IG and Twitter. Check out this guy. Check out the episode. Vernon Reid, thank you so much. We know that you have some big things coming up. We'll follow you on social media. Thank you for bringing this conversation to the world. Thank you for what you do for the music industry, both as an artist and now as someone that champions for the artist in the AI world. And I look forward to meeting you soon, brother. Hopefully celebrate both our birthdays.
All right. Bek Lover.
No matter what you've been through, no matter how crazy life gets, just remember, wherever you are at this point, you can always make a comeback. This is your boy, Bek Lover. Vernon Reid in the house. Thank you for everything, and we'll see you next time on Bek Lover. Bek Lover.